My name is JoDee Neal. I'm the author of Outcry Witness, a former prosecutor's guide to healing injustice after sexual violence. You are watching Outcry Witness Unspoken, which is a podcast with video that goes over with guests and by myself what it feels like to have things inside of you that need to be said but are unsaid. These are the things that are unspoken. Today, I want to discuss Spiritual Abuse Awareness Month, which is understood to be during the month of January. I have been discussing Human Trafficking Prevention Month, which is also during the month of January, and quite frankly, there's a decent amount of overlap between the two. But today, I want to walk us through what spiritual abuse really is. Are using God, the soul, hell, and any other thing that could possibly be leveraged upon a person's soul to ensure compliance from their prey. This is not just a Judeo-Christian religion thing. This is used near and far, anywhere there are perpetrators and prey. So we do need to talk about this because spiritual abuse is an access point to a vulnerable person, a child, a woman, a little boy, whoever it is who might need help, whoever it is who might have problems, they are vulnerable to spiritual abuse because it is part and parcel of human nature to seek out a power higher than ourselves. Of course, there are agnostics and there are atheists, but if you look at research, that is a very small percentage of what human beings admit to believing. Largely, world religions are still a major component in human behavior. And that may be because of conditioning and teaching, but it may also be because there is something inside of us that feels that there is a connection with a higher power. And that feeling inside of us causes us to seek out the truth. And there are places that are supposed to be safe for truth seeking, and churches are one of them. I do not know of a faith that openly lauds abuse of minors, sexual abuse, sexual assault. I don't know of a religion that says it's a good thing to do in their holy text. This is something that happens as a result of access, perpetrators having access. This is not a recognition week that has been formally recognized by the government. It is a recognition week of people who are understanding that what they lived through in church environments was very, very harmful to their overall functionality as both children and adult going through their normal lives on this planet. There's a couple of different real world examples I'm going to talk about. One is the Warren Jeffs Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints Church organization. Let's just call it an organization. It is a criminal enterprise. He is really no better than a member of the mafia. In fact, he's much worse. He ran a criminal enterprise in, rural Western America, as well as in my backyard here in Texas. And he is actually doing prison time for the role that he played here in Texas. However, it's important to note, while that is a very interesting and very important social structure to look at, there are relatives of Warren Jeffs' church, let's just say, among us here in the free world. You know, you don't have to be living on a compound in West Texas to experience the highlights. I am going to do something that I have not done before, and that is publicly speak on my experience at Canyon Creek Christian Academy, which is an independent, unregulated Baptist Christian school that was located in Richardson, Texas. I attended that school from second grade until my graduation from high school. And part of why I am bringing my experience up is because I lived many of the common threads that we see in Keep Sweet and Obey, the Warren Jeffs documentary on Netflix, documenting the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints church and the role that Jeffs played in it. My experience was obviously nowhere near as severe as what those survivors experienced. They experienced the far end of the spectrum, and I am that there are many who have still not come forward or disclosed. And I want you to know that I will always be a safe space should you decide to do that. What I have lived through is a very junior version of that. And it involved a lot of the similar tactics, including a tremendous permeation of discussion of hell. Always talking about hell. A similar social structure with an authoritarian leader and, a close-knit group of supporters of that leader, and then the rest of us who were taught blanket, writ large obedience. I identify very strongly with the way the females and the children were treated at Warren Jeffs' criminal enterprise. I understand the hierarchy and what that means in terms of the predator's access to prey. I understand not having an outlet, being told that the outside world is not your friend and not to go there and not to talk about what happens in this place. I've lived through that. And, the ultimate outcome of all of these things is something that I call soul rape. Soul rape. I had previously attended Word of Faith school, which was overseen by Pastor Bob Tilton, brother Bob, and he was a televangelist and a very successful one. I grew up in pews in American churches where people were speaking in tongues, people were throwing their crutches and various braces and ace bandages around, I'm healed. There was, speaking of tongues, there was evangelical singing and dancing, and it was a hoot and hollering good time. And so going from that environment to Canyon Creek Christian Academy was actually really different, because Canyon Creek Christian Academy had a darkness that I don't remember Word of Faith having. I definitely remember Word of Faith being zany. But I also remember being regarded as a very special child. They would ask me to lay hands on people in the church and heal them. I felt like I was one of God's children. And when I went to Canyon Creek Christian Academy, I didn't feel like I was worthy of being one of God's children, even though I was still a child. I left Word of Faith after kindergarten, and I skipped the first grade. They put me directly into the second grade. And I plowed through. And over the years, I suffered tremendous harm at this place. He was not discovered, apparently, until this article was published, I suppose. And that is when a deacon went around and handed copies of his ticket out to people in the church, and it was discovered that way. I did not know why all my friends were leaving the school. I did not know, but I was very bothered. And I remember that it happened around the same time as when Southern Methodist University got the death penalty for football. So the entire football program was canceled after being a national success, winning all kinds of titles and things. And that was around the time I remember my friends leaving. I was not so lucky. We lived around the corner from the school, and my father was opposed to public schools. Even though we lived in a pretty good school district, we were in Plano and Richardson, Texas. But my dad was very fearful of me getting pregnant as a teenager by a boy who was not my same race. And he refused to enroll us in the public schools. Instead, we attended Canyon Creek Christian Academy, which was an extremely harmful event that absolutely shaped the trajectory of my life. I was blessed in that I don't recall an adult who hurt me while I attended that school, but I know it happened to others. I have spoken since I graduated to quite a few of my classmates from those years, and I understand that there were atrocities that took place in the locker room, in the prayer tower, and in some other places. I did not know what else to do besides survive it. I knew that if I told my dad the stuff that I was seeing in that school, he would not care. And in fact, he would support them. In those days, it was perfectly fine to yell at little children and tell them that they're going to hell, and to watch them cry, and to demand that they accept the Lord as their Savior, and to come forward and, throw themselves upon the altar and make you look like a real good preacher. When you get little kids who are repenting and getting saved and this, that, and the other, you feel like a real effective public speaker. And he was a very effective public speaker. In fact, I would argue that if he had been the pastor of the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, he would have had far more success than Warren Jeffs, because he was way better looking and a very gifted public speaker. If you listen to some of the recordings of Warren Jeffs, he was really nothing to write home about. Obviously, he had an entire package which made him capable of manipulating adult men and women as well as children. But he's not anything special to me. But Terry Smith was. He was a gifted orator for me to be able to sit here and talk about it, because like most trauma survivors, I would just shudder. When I would go back there in my mind, I would just shudder. And I can remember, and I've talked about this a lot, I can remember being young, that 7 or 8 age range, and feeling the pews and feeling the varnish on the pews, and finding my fingernails in the grain of the wood of the varnished pew, and grabbing on to that grain, because I believed that I was going to hell. I believed as a small child that I was going to hell because of something I had said or thought or didn't think or had done. There was nothing you could do at that place that could placate them except coming forward at the end of the sermon. That is all you could do that would shut them up. And that was a moderate level spiritual abuse situation, in my opinion, compared to the extreme, which is the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. And let me tell you something. Places like Canyon Creek Christian Academy are on every corner here in Texas. You don't know what's going on inside these places. You're not allowed to look. They don't have to file tax returns with the IRS. You have no idea who's getting paid for what, how much money that church is making. They buy land, they build, and on and on and on it goes. This church is no longer in existence. Canyon Creek Christian Academy, the campus is still at Custer and Renner, and I believe it's an Adventist church now. Many people who have escaped Warren Jeffs' criminal organization have had similar moments of grief and mourning. You can't not. If there is a place where bad things happen to you, you have two options. You can avoid it at all costs, which I have definitely done. As much as I love that neighborhood, Canyon Creek, I cannot live there because I can't be that close to that place, even though that's where I grew up. Or you go back and you try and take your power back. And, I've done both of these things. I want to talk about some things that these two organizations have in common, okay? One, both are led by a man preacher who earns a living by using his voice. Okay? At the end of the day, preachers get paid to talk. I mean, how nice is that? I tell you, I'm this close to starting my own church. Not really joking either. Because that they have the best job in the world. All you have to do is talk to people and you get paid a lot of times a very nice living. And my understanding was that Terry Smith made a lot of money working at that church. He's somewhere else now. I don't know where, but that church is closed. My hunch is that they were sued in oblivion, which is absolute justice if that's the case. So, two organizations led by human men who speak for money. And he had an authoritarian regime where he was at the very top of a social structure. I mean, wait, this is like the patriarchy's dream. You know, you get to talk and get worshiped as a man of God for money, and you get to, you know, defile anybody at the church that you wanted. And honestly, that was the case for Terry Smith too. If you read that article, Savior or Seducer, he was perpetrating on women who were having marital problems during their counseling sessions. And even as a child in that church, we knew him to be unfaithful to his wife. And it was really hard to sit there and to listen to him preach, knowing even just what little I knew. And I still don't know much. I guarantee there is a mountain of scandal that I have not yet uncovered because I don't really talk to too many people from there. I'm connected on Facebook with some, but I have not gone back to any of the reunions. We were told not to have contact with the outside world, and clearly that was a major component of Warren Jeff's criminal enterprise. Zero contact with the outside world, and they took it several steps further by removing the ability. There was no phones, there was no mail, there was no way to get a message to the outside world except by escaping, which was very difficult to do. One other common denominator, the next one I want to talk about, is the importance of obedience. I cannot stress enough how often obedience would be discussed on a daily basis. First of all, we had chapel every school day, meaning, you know, rather than learning art or, you know, journalism or, you know, any other normal electives, we spent an hour to 2 hours every day in chapel. And it would either be listening to Terry Smith or to a visiting preacher. I know I felt very relieved when Terry Smith was not preaching. To me, that was a win. I was just so grateful I didn't have to listen to him. And even the visiting preachers were very strict fundamentalist, independent fundamentalist sects, S-E-C-T-S, sects of this ilk of Christianity. You know, I really don't even know what it is. People ask me where I went to high school, and I say a cult in Richardson. And thank God for this article in D Magazine, or no one would believe me. No one would believe me if I said, oh, I went to a cult. They're like, yeah, okay, whatever. But at least I have some documented evidence of what we survived there. At least at minimum, the hypocrisy can be acknowledged. But obedience was everything. We were not allowed to question anything. Another instance, I saw a teacher tackle a student. He dove over a couple desks and tackled a student. I saw a teacher holding a student by his neck against a locker. So there, you know, I definitely witnessed physical abuse, which kept me quiet. I was the poster girl for obedience. I knew that I had to survive it. I knew I had nowhere to go. My mother was gone. She was gone. And my dad was a lawyer, and, you know, All these teachers were on the take. They're all giving him information. My dad was really scary. He was a very scary man. And between my dad and the school and this pastor, Terry Smith, was also very, very scary. I had to walk a very fine line. The most rebellious thing that I did in high school that I can remember is a teacher wrote down Catcher in the Rye by JoDee Salinger, scribbled it on a piece of paper and folded it up real small and gave it to me because I had wanted to read, something cool. And I got that book and I read it. My dad took me to Barnes and Noble and I read it and I couldn't tell anybody. That was, very rebellious of me. I knew that there was stuff happening to kids I went to school with, but I didn't know what. And, I had my own problems. My mom was a severe alcoholic, and we were actually made fun of by adults at that school. There was a dad who made a remark to my little sister, no wonder you are the way you are, with your mom being who she is. And I know I yelled at him. I know I said something like, you're supposed to be a Christian. You're talking to a kid that way. Obedience. Obedience was everything. I mean, you could not walk out of line because there were really no rules as to what they could do to you. Corporal punishment was accepted and encouraged by parents. There's no parent that's going to come up and yell at you if you spank my kid. Can you imagine? We had to sign a contract that said that we would not drink alcohol, smoke cigarettes, listen to hard rock music. I mean, it was all this stuff, and we were kids. Well, it's not enforceable, but the reason why we had to sign it is because some girls got caught smoking a cigarette, and they all got kicked out. Let's talk about the next thing I want to talk about is the requirement of female subjugation. From a social order standpoint, in an authoritarian regime, which has one talkative man making money at the top, you don't have a lot of dispute resolution process. You don't want people going to the family courts. You don't want people going to the police. You do not want CPS being called or TEA or any kind of investigating agency. You want to fly under the radar as quietly as you possibly can. And one of the ways that happens is by beginning at a very young age at destroying girl children, destroying self-esteem, sense of purpose. I mean, they intended to traumatize you. We were allowed to be one of two things: a preacher's wife or a teacher at the Christian school. I specifically remember being told in chapel that those were my two options. Thankfully, my father was a lawyer and fully expected me to become a lawyer. We were required to wear very long skirts, nothing at the knee or above the knee. The skirt had to be below the knee or to the ankle. We had to wear hosiery or socks, nothing sleeveless. Nothing showing any part of your décolletage, chest. I had a nice little collection of flowery dresses with lace collars. Can you believe that? Me. They encouraged little craft type things, like knitting, embroidery, so that was kind of similar to, teaching you your place. You're cooking, you're domestic, you wear the lace collar, you are the preacher's wife, blah, blah, blah. And you have even less right to question what we're doing than your, colleague over there who's a boy. The boys did have dress code, but it was not like what we had to do as women. And my understanding of what took place, because there was Terry Smith and then there was Tim Smith and then there was another one. And I always believed, based on my eyes and ears, that they had kind of their pick of the litter of whoever it was, they wanted from the adult population. If you were a girl in an organization like that, you had a lot to overcome. In my senior year, I remember the principal came in and gave us, it's like a 6-week series about what to expect at college. They did not want us going to regular college. They wanted us to go to private Christian colleges like Pensacola Christian College, the Jack Hyles College, whatever that's called, Hyles Christian Ministries, I don't know. And then Liberty was one. And, Liberty was liberal compared to the other ones. And they really wanted us to go to the other ones. Brother Tim was the principal of the school. He was Terry Smith's brother. And I remember there was a big scandal involving a student who unalived himself. It was a great, horrible tragedy because he discovered that his mother and the principal were involved in a relationship. And there was an adjacent thread that I would rather not say publicly, but involved a student. So I just had to grit my teeth and bear it. I knew that I was in a very bad situation. I knew that it was deeply hypocritical, that they hated me. They hated all the girls, and I did my best, and they still hated me. I mean, I was like Jezebel at the school because I did see through it. Now, I survived. I didn't get kicked out. Even though I begged to go to public school, I had to stay at the school. I graduated in a class of 8 people. 8 people. I was valedictorian. I was the daughter of a well-known and gifted trial lawyer. And I was ashamed that he would send me to this place, that I wasn't in one of the really good school districts where I could actually compete. I was like my eyes were closed when I was in high school and I was the valedictorian. Like, imagine if I had been at a school with programming. I have still done okay for myself, but also too, I was taught creationism, and I've had to completely learn science on my own as an adult. Like Warren Jeffs, the extent, the survivors of his cult, it is so hard to even think about a creator or God. And for many, many years, I would shudder, and I was so mad. I graduated, and as soon as I went to college, I had been at college for less than 2 weeks, and I had obtained a fake ID and had bought a keg to host a keg party on the beach. And I just went bananas, and I felt so good being out of there, but I put myself at great risk. And that is what begins my adult journey of sexual assault, when I was first abused when I was 19. And after that, there's a solid 7-8 years where I don't really know what happened. I barely remember law school. I barely remember any college. I was in a state of disassociation that I call the darkness. I was never sober. And I did graduate law school on time, and I did pass the bar exam the first time, but I was not there. And there was just a bunch of bad stuff kept happening to me, and I had nowhere to turn. I think I did go to the Episcopal Church a couple of different times when I was in college, but I just couldn't do it. And I had no support system. I felt like everything I had been through was a lie, and that I was really just on my own in the world. And so spiritual abuse is hell. That's the irony of it, is all they talk about is hell. But in doing so, they create an actual hell. And to tell children with pure souls that they're going to hell for any reason whatsoever is child abuse. And the most dangerous thing I think about spiritual abuse is that they just constantly make you think about death to the point where you just think about dying all the time. And they blur the line between the world of the living and the dead. And you just don't develop a healthy love of life. And you just want to die all the time. You're sure you're going to heaven because you keep saying that you are when you go up and get saved all these times after the sermon. But you just want it to be over because you know that you suck. You're never going to be good enough. You know, what is the point? What, to be some preacher's wife? To be a teacher at this school? No, that's not good enough for me. Just put me out of my misery. And it is with great, with great joy that I come before you today, able to tell the story, because I could not for the better part of 3 decades. I could not talk about this. But also too, it just goes to show how your relationship with the creator, with the source, is truly yours. And no one should be able to take that away from you, but they do. And how do they do it? They do it through spiritual abuse. And I am grateful that the abuse that I suffered was just what it was. I cannot imagine having crimes happen to me under the threat of hell. And that's what happens to so many. All these Warren Jeffs girls, they had no choice. And it wasn't that they just didn't have a choice in a physical sense. It's that they were going to hell if they did not comply. Their eternal soul would be damned. It's not just this lifetime they're trying to ruin to secure your compliance so they can stick it in you. No. They want all your lifetimes to be ruined. They want to completely collapse who you are, past, present, and future. And if you don't get on your knees and open your mouth and fill in the blank, you are going to burn in fire. And they're going to tell you exactly what that feels like, and exactly what tattered clothes you're going to be wearing, and exactly what the talons of the demons in hell are going to feel like. Very graphic, very real. And this is their leverage. And it is the most criminal way to secure compliance with criminal acts. And if someone does this to you, they are the ones going to hell, not you. And I hope that you watch this and you know that you will always have an ear. Okay? I will listen, and I will do the best I can to help as many people as I can through this, through any kind of abuse, but especially this kind of abuse, because it is the most insidious abuse that takes place at places of worship. And what they take from you is so much bigger than a moment in time. They take your most precious, deeply held belief that is supposed to be the most beautiful thing to you, and they take it and they destroy it. It's really remarkable that a human being can have power like this over another human being. It's really unthinkable, and it's got to stop. We can find our own relationship with God. We can. I have. But that is not the way. You go into some toxic church like that, you need to run. They have nothing to offer you and only pain. So, survivors of Warren Jeffs, I see you. I feel for you. I will do anything I can to help you. And for everyone else, I want you to know that they are not outliers. There are insidious church organizations all over the country, all over the world, who may not take it that far, but they take it plenty far enough for a 7, 8-year-old little girl. And they have to be stopped. You should not get tax-exempt status while you're abusing children, while you're feasting off the bodies of their mothers and then casting them out of the congregation for being ungodly. These are criminal enterprises led by criminals who must be stopped.